and then let me know when we're live on
YouTube.
Yes. You think we're good? You know, last time give it a couple minutes because it was like.
I think so.
Well, hi everyone.
There we go.
Hey
everyone.
Call for when to start.
Good now.
I didn't do it.
Not a feeling.
Okay. Sorry. Okay, now we're good.
And there's a siren. Well, welcome everyone to the podcast. Today we're going to be talking about Greek mythology, and we have a guest.
So, apologies for being a little bit late.
Good evening, ladies.
You know how it is when you live with people, it's like 200 things. What about your stream? It's
late. Life happens.
Oh.
If Colin, if you want to introduce yourself.
Try doing that complete with the time difference. Hi, I'm Colin P. I don't have a channel other than to listen to these things, but I tend to hang around on the Valkyries and Loki's streams and the like. And a very long time ago, when I was at grammar school, I got an O level in classical studies, which was Roman and Greek history and mythology.
That's fair.
And I'm a huge fan of Clash of Titans.
No, I like Greek mythology, but like I feel like a lot of it I learned from you, and then like reading more about the myth of what you told me.
Well, this teacher what's the mythology? I do. It looks like which one?
Yeah, I would say my knowledge is basically like Greek mythology and obviously like Roman mythology because they're a lot they overlap and there's similarities.
Well, they're the same ones, they have different names.
Right. And then that's my knowledge.
Yeah, I feel like mine's. Sorry, go ahead, Colin.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah, it's definitely very similar. When you've only got, I keep getting confused when it comes to the gods. I just have to remember. Okay, I know the ones that the planets are named after the Roman versions, but it's the ones that aren't planets. I get confused which is Roman and which is Greek. Athena, Minerva, you know.
Yeah, if you ever meet me,
there are no Amazons in Roman mythology.
Right.
Talk at the same time.
God. I feel like for me, it's Greek and Roman, and then it's Egyptian and North, Celtic, and then a little bit of all the other ones.
I like a lot of.
Yeah, Roman is the planets, and then Greeks, it's the same names, but they have the same abilities as the Romans.
And I feel like that's how people get them mixed up because it's literally the same person, you just have a different name. And with see, that's what I thought, and I know what I'm doing. Oh god, I don't know how to say the name. It's the Greek god that does the forge.
Hephaestus?
Sure.
Herpietus?
But apparently that god, and then I can't think of his name in the Roman ones, but it's like that was like one of the few deities where it's like Roman and Greek were actually different.
Well, you also have a difference between Cupid and Eros.
I think it's funny a lot of people think Greek and Roman are the same thing, but there are some subtle differences.
Right.
No, wait, is Eros like Cupid or it's a giant baby in a diaper?
No, that's the Roman version. It's the one in diaper. Eros is the more of like the hot god.
Oh.
Eros is the one that got converted by the proton molecule and smashed into. Oh, sorry, I've been watching Expanse again. Yeah, I think Eros. I've got a feeling it's something like the planets are named after the Romans.
Yes.
But I think a lot of the satellites are named after Greek mythology.
Yep.
And now Celtic mythology as well. I mean, Oberon, I think, is a Celtic. Is a Celtic deity because he's one of the ones in Midsummer Night's Dream. I remember right.
Is that right?
Yes, it deals with the Fate Court.
Oh. Yeah, I didn't really know a whole lot about Celtic mythology until I started reading the Druid, Iron Druid. Wow, my worst day.
Well, I need the basics because a lot of the saints for Christianity were Celtic in origin, so it's easily known.
Oh.
Yeah,
That's
so
cool.
I know a bit about Egypt. I know a bit about the Celts. Probably slightly more about the Norse.
Yes.
But I was like Greek and Roman are the ones I studied at school, and being as I was always a science. I mean, I quite literally grew up during the age of the space race, and I'm old enough to have actually been woken up to watch the moon landing on the news. So I had all these Roman and Greek
You're dating
deities,
yourself
the
there.
planet, and the rest of it. I know, yes, I'm dated. I'm old. Let's put it this way: you see this picture of the medieval archer. That's a genuine photograph of me at Cressy. No, it's not. But my medieval
Hey,
kit
how do
looks
we
quite
not
like
know
that.
that though?
Oh well.
That's really. I really like that
Yeah.
picture.
Yeah, that's why I feel like for me, the ones I know the most about is Roman and Greek, but then I also know the same amount for Egyptian and North because they're the ones I was into the most growing up.
I'd like to find out more about go back the other way, go back pre-Greeks to sort of to the Assyrians and the Sumerians and the really old ones. I mean, I've actually done a couple of courses on I've listened to a lot of lectures on, should we say, rather than actually studied per se. Great courses plus and things like that on ancient medieval history and some
Yeah, I was
religions.
gonna ask what came before the Greek culture, because I mean, like that's what a lot of people are known as. Like for most people, that's how far back it goes.
Oh, please, I would say it.
But it goes back further
No,
than that, right?
there's ones the Babylonians. Yes.
Yeah, Babylonians, Assyrians, Sumerians, Akkadians,
Oh, so for the butcher.
and of course the ancient Hebrews, the Israelites, Persians.
Yep.
Persians were around for a very long time. But what I find is, I mean, one of the most interesting is you look back to the Epic of Gilgamesh.
Oh, I had to read that in school.
Yeah, well, I think that is the oldest known written text. I think it's certainly in there. And that's got a story which is remarkably similar to the story of the flood, Noah and the flood in the Bible.
Okay, you read it and you understood it, Nick?
Yeah, because we were learning about Hindu, so Indian culture or religion, and we had to read that.
Oh, right, no, I never.
Yeah, I just realized we're probably talking about two different ones named Gilgamesh.
I think the closest things I know about the Hindus is Robert Zelazny did a book called, is it Shadow Jack? No, one of Robert Zelazny's books is based around Hindu mythology, or he's touched on Hindu mythology. But I'm not. Again, that's not one I'm not that familiar with.
I'm not either. I know 4 of these for Hindu or Indian culture, and that's it.
I'm gonna just sit in the corner and let you guys talk and soak in all the information.
I mean, what I find amazing is well, actually, no, it's not amazing. It's interesting, but how much of it is the same sort of stories.
Right, just different names or different characteristic traits, etc.
Yeah, I mean, when you what people these days probably find difficult to bear in mind, quite understandably. I mean, especially, no offence to you young ladies, but the younger generation, especially if you're growing up with the internet, with
Oh, you
mobile
make me
phones and
laugh.
this.
That's so sweet.
We've got I mean, I'm included in this. I'm just possibly a generation behind earlier. But what we've all had to admit is that for thousands of years,
Mhm.
these stories were told. They weren't written down.
No, they're told around the fire.
Told around the fire. I'm actually listening again to a fascinating series of lectures about King Arthur, the history and legend of
Oh,
King Arthur.
I love a
Fascinating.
folklore.
Oh, it's a fascinating series. I was lucky enough to I did a stream with the Valkyries a while ago on King Arthur, and I think as a result of that, Sam's husband and possibly Sam himself actually ended up getting a copy of these lectures as well. But there's one bit she's talking about where she's talking about the Greek, sorry, not Greek, Welsh in particular, because obviously the art thing
well,
does go back Greek, but where it's
I never knew
done.
that.
You can tell from the writing style that they are written down oral legends because they're designed, and you can see the style of things in there which are absolutely standard, rote, designed for the poet or the bard to switch to stop concentrating on what he's saying.
right, and just
So
the
he,
melody and music behind it.
so he can go through the list of names and descriptions while he's actually consciously he's thinking ahead to the next part of the story. You know, you can see this. You know, you can imagine this must go back thousands.
I said,
of
imagine
years.
instead of it being on a TV screen, it's a person standing in front of a fire with like a little piece of paper or from memory performing this in front of everyone else.
Well, I
Right.
mean, there is an argument that writing completely destroyed our memory, our ability to memorize, because we didn't have to anymore. Writing comes
Huh.
along, and with writing, we don't have to learn everything from scratch. We
That's
don't
true. I
have,
didn't need to go back and read
Yeah.
it. But
Yeah,
again,
exactly.
like a lot of things that are written is what's passed down. So if there's an accuracy or if it's wrong, it's it's how it was told to you.
Oh,
And
yes,
it
exactly.
depends on how you learn too.
I mean, there's the old Chinese whispers. There's you whisper, you start whining. I mean, there's one example of that is Chinese. I don't know if you played a game, if you call it call it something different. Your side of Honda, but basically, you get in a line or something, and one of you whispers something to the next person, and it goes round. And by the time it gets to the end, it's completely changed. I mean, there's one supposedly famous example is supposedly from the First World War, where the message starts off as going, send reinforcements, we are going to advance, we're going to advance an enemy. The message that gets to headquarters is, send 3 and 6pence, we are going to a dance.
Right.
Which proves the point.
That's a fun name. We used to play that in elementary school. I was always good at playing that.
I was horrible at playing it because I can't remember anything.
I mean, that's the argument. It's a perfect example of the fact that progress isn't always a good thing. We learn to write. As a species, we learn to write. We can now put down our thoughts. We now in the 21st century can read the adventures of Gilgamesh 6,000 years ago. We can read what other people have done. Our thoughts and ideas can be passed down. We don't have to go back and relearn everything from scratch. We can build. We can, as Einstein said, stand on the shoulders of giants. But
and also, like, we can also pass down things that we were told growing up to younger generations as well.
Oh yeah, pass on our wisdom to our descendants. But the converse of that is, we no longer have to remember much. Our memories are not as good as a non or pre-literate society's memory in general, because they don't have to be. We don't have to remember. we don't have to, if you're writing a story or anything, you don't have to come up with a formula that someone is going to be able to commit to memory. You put it down on paper, and that's
So
it.
if
You know,
I just
you can
start writing
change it.
everything down, I won't remember anything. Got it.
You already have that, so that's different.
You're mean.
No, but I mean, it's
She's saying I have a crappy memory. I can just start writing things down like with the little post-its everywhere, like a trail.
oh, we all do. I mean, very, very few people are going to have the same sort of memory that from a literate society or a pre-literate society did. I mean, that's what my view of the Old Testament, for example, is I look at the Old Testament, the Torah, for the Jews, and the Old Testament in the Bible, as basically an oral history, which has then finally been written down. So it goes back, which is why it goes back as far it stretches back long before the Hebrews or the Egyptians or their predecessors learned to write. And then they learned to write and they put all the writing down, which is why I can sit back and I'm not a religious person, but as I say, my view of the Old Testament is that it's an explanation of how the universe came about, how the universe works, that from a pre-literate society that then gets written down.
Right.
The same for the Greeks and the Romans. Well, not so much the Romans, because obviously the Romans had writing from the start. I'm not. I can't remember how far back Greek civilization goes and how close it is to invention literacy.
Well, I was going to say it's a good thing that, now we have documents or things that they did write down because, unfortunately, a lot of temples and a lot of the ancient Greek culture and their staple,
Destroyed.
haven't survived time. If they didn't mark any of that down, we wouldn't have that.
Oh, yes. I mean, there's one of the great tragedies, of course, was the repeated, in fact, burnings of the Library of Alexandria.
Yep.
Yeah.
The last one being the one in which Hypatia was killed. But yeah, what we lost there, and so much it went, and then it gets moved down, and it actually gets preserved by the Islamic world, while the European world goes into not necessarily the Dark Ages, a phrase I hate, but we lose a lot of it.
There's a lot of history or knowledge loss.
Yeah,
you can't retain.
There's so much, but then then we rediscover a lot of it comes back with the Crusades, which is why I detest the idea that I'm a medievalist. I love the medieval period, but I do. The reason I said I look like that, I've got a bow like that, I've got kit like that. I do medieval reenactment. I know.
We talked about your weapons.
Yeah, I know a reasonable. I'm by no means an expert, but I'm an interested amateur about the medieval period, and I detest this idea that life was brutish and short, and they were stupid and uneducated. They weren't, and a lot of it came back in because of the Crusades. A lot of the knowledge that was down in the Islamic world came back into Europe. That's where our ancestors rediscovered a lot of the Greek stories. Some of the Greek stories were known because obviously Greece was still there.
Right.
Although Greece actually kind of almost sort of moved down into Turkey to Byzantium, to Constantinople, what's now Istanbul, after the Roman Empire split. But a lot of it was lost, and it's come back again. But it's fascinating what those stories are. And I suspect what sort of things they can tell us about what our ancestors thought, and the fact that they weren't any different to us in any way, shape, or form, apart from knowledge.
Excuse me.
I mean, obviously there's going to be differences. Life was different for them back then, but
Right, you're thinking of $100 to intellectual and industry. Word. Technological aids. There you go. Very similar.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I said the main difference is in knowledge. They were no more, they were no less intelligent on average than we are now. They were exactly the same. You could not, if you got a time scoop from Doctor Who, grab someone from Trojan War, grab someone from ancient Babylonia, brought them into the 20th century, gave them some modern clothes to wear so they didn't stand out, you would not be able to tell them apart. They were exactly the same as us. The only difference was that we've got 2, 3, 4,000 years of accumulated knowledge and learning. But they had pretty much the same concerns as us. They had the same desires, the same. Obviously, they changed between cultures, but the same hopes and fears as us. And we can tell. I think legends tell us that's why they say there's only, I think, 9 stories as a supposedly basic storylines, which is why you read enough fantasy or science fiction and you say, okay, well, I've seen that there, I've seen that there. Much as I love The Expanse, that storyline's been in Star Trek and I've read it because it's still the same sort of thing. It's the same sort of ideas and urges that brings us mythology.
Right. But I actually have a funny story about the Dildomash is that. So in college, I was taking the mythology tours, and my professor hated me because every time she got a fact wrong, I would correct her. So she went through all the religions, and she tried to find the hardest one she'd think of to stump me. So we're having her Dildomash, and she looked at my paper, thinking she stumped me, and I have all the gods written out, what they're named for, the outline of the story.
wow.
How do you know this already? I thought we'd start off with this one. It was so bad.
So by the end of the course, was there anything that you didn't really know a lot about, or anything that stumped you?
No.
Like,
Unless the course we're doing our Greek and Romance, like, I already knew this. I signed our course thing, we do like your Egyptian or Celtic, like a religion I didn't know a lot about, and that wasn't the case.
Yeah, well, I think you find that when you get to that point where you can study, I mean, especially if you are after formal education. I mean, I never went to university, but after college, university, etc., especially in what we might call adult education, you're studying things that interest you. You're going to study something that interests you. You're probably going to know a bit about it. I mean, I was like that. I'm similar at school. I mean, I've been interested in Greeks and Romans. So obviously, when I started doing that at school, I knew, like most people, knew something about it. Learn other stuff that we didn't know. There's the professor on this course I'm watching. She has a great story where she's a medieval scholar.
Oh, nice.
Dorsey Armstrong is the lady's name, and she's done a lot. She's all for the Great Courses Plus, and she's done a lot. The last one of hers I actually watched was all the different things that happened in 1215, and I knew about 2 of them. One of which was Magna Carta, the other one which was the Full Lateran Council, and a load of other things happened then in the year 1215 as well across Europe and Asia. But she tells this story because she's an expert on medieval literature. I think she's quite an expert on early printing, and she tells us story. She's at an international conference years ago now at Wells Cathedral in I'm not quite sure where Wales is. It's either in England or Wales.
Right?
But there's a carving in this cathedral on the back of a seat, I think, where you kneel in the ground, and it's
Oh, yeah, I heard that one.
and there's it's basically it's a horse. It's the back end of a horse, literally the back end of a horse. There's a wood carving, bang, and it's going through a gate as a portcullis comes down. And
Wow.
and obviously there's a guide down. There's a guide saying this is Sir Galahad going across. At which point, unfortunately, the poor guide gets told by about 20 Arthurian scholars, no, that's actually someone else, because obviously these people were scholars, and apparently they've now changed the literature. And, you always can find something, and you can always find something that you're going to know, perhaps that other people can't, and then you pick that up, or you find something you didn't know, or another version, or another point of view that you didn't know. It's quite fascinating, which is why I love watching these things. Getting in these courses. I mean, I say this is probably the third or fourth time I've either listened to or actually watched this particular series of lectures.
Right. Now, I've heard that carving, how like a lot of people are fighting over who it is, since it, like you said, it's just looked like about a horse.
Well,
It could be like knight or horse rider for all you know, right?
Exactly.
This particular one, it's a story from King Arthur where the knight, the hero, goes across a drawbridge and he's going through the gate, and the portcullis comes down and he makes it through, but his horse doesn't. In the legend. It's just what they've done is they've misidentified the character in the legend.
Right.
But given how similar a lot of these names are, a lot of them come out of Welsh, I'm not surprised. But
I wish I could remember who it was they were talking about. When we were in the church in London, and they're showing us the burial ground, and he said that they're still unsure of if it was one of the kings or one of his like servants.
Oh, they didn't know who like King Henry VIII or one of the servants.
It was what was church again?
Probably Westminster Abbey if it was the king.
Yes. I always forget the name of so hard to say it.
You got it. Westminster Abbey.
Yeah, I know, and that's why I forgot to. It's like, I don't know what to say.
I was trying to think of it, but Call came through. Good job, Dory. Good. You were there and you can't remember the name.
I remember the name, I just didn't say it.
No, I didn't.
There's a lot of kings and queens to remember if you're in this side of the pond. Especially if you're in this little island of ours. There's a lot of kings and queens to remember. Very long way back. 2,000, almost 2,000 years on.
Yep. Yeah, we were there. We learned a lot about the history, and it was pretty cool.
I can see how a lot of people, well, a lot of wealthier, like, of nobility would use Westminster Abbey for, like, ceremony or wedding because, like, just inside of the church was so pretty.
Yeah, just one thing about the floor.
Gotta go.
And at the very end of the tour, you're on the floor, and you're like, and here is the mass grave.
Yep.
Like, oh, I'm out.
Well, I mean, if you think about this is one of the things that is so irritating at times about. That's interesting. An echo there. I sound really weird there as well. About medieval films and TV shows. They're always so dark, so muted in colours, it's so damn muddy.
Yeah, I never got that.
Because you look at it with like the Dark Ages and full of like death.
But no, during that time it's like full of color and creativity. So it's like
the thing that most people tend to forget, you do this and you look inside the castles and you look inside the churches. The thing that most people don't seem to remember is that these churches were Catholic churches.
Right.
There was nothing else. There is nothing in Western Europe. You've got the Greek Orthodox and the Russian Orthodox in the East, but in Western Europe, there is nothing but what we these days call Catholic churches. There is no other Christianity. That's it. And the Catholic Church loves its bling.
Oh yeah.
The High Church of England loves its bling. I mean, you said obviously you've been in Westminster Abbey. You know, any church, especially that was a Catholic church, so anything over that 600 years old, beautifully decorated, gold, paintings. It was colourful. They had the dyes, they had the colours.
That's
It's
right.
not all brown and green.
When you watch the music and stuff, it's none of it's there. It's like, that's not right.
I mean, just look at any of the artwork from that period. It's full of color, so
And I mean, it's quite probable that a lot of statues were painted as well. Apparently, some still seem to have some paint on them. But, and I presume it's because there's just this perception that we have that the Middle Ages was a holding point. We tend to forget that the people in the Middle Ages weren't living in the Middle Ages. They were living in the present. The people in ancient Greece weren't living in ancient Greece.
Right,
They were living in Greece of their present. You know, we put these names on people. One of the best reminders of this I read was I'm also a huge science fiction fan. And I can't remember what it was, but there was someone. It was set 1,000 years or so, certainly far future, not the next couple of years. And at one point, they referred to the medieval Victorian era, which, of course, to us is no. That's a quick bit of maths here. There's 300-400 years between the medieval period and the Victorian period. But if you're looking back from 1,000 years in our future, we're still Middle Ages. We're going to be the historical people. We're going to be the ancient ones. If the race survives that long.
I heard math and my brain turned into a puddle.
Yeah, that's orange poison. I love math. Oh, there she goes.
Wait, come back. Well, give me money. Let's go number.
Oh, wait, what's worse? Math or geography?
Maths.
Math.
Or history?
Yeah, math. I like history. I just can't retain it all.
Okay.
I can tell that you're Americans, not by your accent, but because you say math. It's maths. It's mathematics.
Math. Boo.
Math.
Boo followed by it.
Yeah, it's counting. Heck, it's numbers. Boo.
Well, unfortunately, our schooling sucked, so it was for us. It was whatever we can learn from a textbook. We had to figure out on our own. That was pretty much it.
I had this is what a lot of people say that what is their schooling that actually puts them off things like history, maths. It's like that's really off-putting to echo about half a second. I mean, I actually remember when I was at school. I don't know if there was. I mean, obviously, I was 10, 11 years old at the time when I went up from what I think you call elementary grade school up to high school, or primary school to secondary school. And between my first year and my second year, which I think equates to year 7 and 8 in the way we count it these days, the way you've counted over that side. I don't know if there was a change of government or what, but there was. I remember a major change in the way we learned a lot of things. The one I remember most is Latin. And the first
in America, we're not even taught Latin. It's like people see it as a dead language.
We had a massive change. I mean, this is the let's just say early 70s. I went to a grammar school, which was I hate to use the word elite because it wasn't, but it was a higher level. It's very difficult to explain, especially without coming across as sounding a bit arrogant, which I don't want to. But no, I don't. I mean, it's a different style. It's a different thing. Our education system works a bit differently now. Anyway, we had a Labour government came in and decided to do away with all schools. With all grammar schools. They thought they were elitist and separated things out. And I really don't want to start saying I was smarter than other people because I'm not. Anyway, Latin was taught.
Well, technically, if you're older than us, that makes you wiser, right?
Maybe. I'm genuinely not sure about that. But no, the thing. But what happened was when I was at school, grammar school, secondary school, you had a number of subjects which you had to take. We did our exams at 15 and 16, so fourth year and fifth year. Good try and look at. Your first 2 years, you had subjects. You did mathematics, English. French was the language that the second language in pretty much all British schools, because they're only 20 miles away across the pond, and that's why I've got a longbow to keep them that far away. But we did physics, biology, chemistry. I can't remember that. But then after 2 years, you got to choose. You got to choose what ones you actually wanted to take through to exam. So I actually stayed doing history, and I kept on doing Latin and failed the Latin exam abysmally. But I remember the first year of Latin, all we learned basically was I remember I had a copy of Caesar's Gallic Wars, for example.
Oh wow!
And the left-hand page was in Latin, the right-hand page was in English. And we went through, and that's basically it. You learnt the language. That's how you learn the language.
Oh, I should do it in school. That'd be easier.
Second year, we had my memory says the teacher was much younger, but like I said, I was 12 years old at the time. So what did I know about adults? We had a complete change, an absolute complete and utter change. And the new system was similar to, I don't know if anyone's familiar with linguaphone, and I'm not sure if Rosetta Stone knows the way languages are taught. But now, basically, you didn't just do the language. You did the language, you did the history, you did the culture. So you didn't do Latin, you did the Romans. And part of that was learning the Latin. So you did it as in situ history. And I remember that complete and utter change. And I think that's the point I was hooked. I'd always been interested in history. But
right. I feel like you appreciate the language that you're learning more if you learn the history of it, the culture of it, instead of you just trying to memorize, a bunch of new words.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, Amoa Masamat, Amama Samati Samant. There you go. I can remember how to conjugate the verb for I love after more years than I care to think of.
Yeah.
Come to think of it, I can do daddy, dusty, denny, dusty, des, dem, den. That's the in German after pretty much the same number of years. Learning works, people, But yes, you did, but then you learned more in situ. So you learn the language. I mean, when I was doing languages after I left school, I've always been reasonably good at languages. Science, okay. Maths, singing, no. Languages, I'm one of these people, I've always been reasonably good at languages.
What were you going to say that?
I say for our schooling.
I was absolutely, I can't draw to save my life. I can draw a straight line if I've got a ruler, most of the time. I'm actually not that joking. But I mean, because I remember when I did I touched on a few languages, evening classes or with something like lingua franca. And you did them, and you learnt those languages. You learn in situ. So you learn, if you were learning about food, you would be learning, you'd be reading, you'd be learning for conversation in a restaurant. You'd have a text, and the text would be about going to a restaurant. If you learned about travel, I remember vaguely when it was German and the travel, you'd learn about going by train, and this sort of thing. So you didn't just learn the words, the language. You learned it in relevant situations rather than just independently. I'd love to learn Greek. Unfortunately, while I did a bit of history and I did mythology, I never learned Greek, and I kind of wish I had done.
All right, go ahead, Nick.
Thank you. I was gonna say, for our schooling in middle school, if you're an option, you either have Spanish or French. But the hard part with that is that they'd only write the words on the board, so I could never really learn very well because I couldn't see it.
Yeah.
But I was in choir. So because I was in choir, I learned that way to speak languages like Latin for singing and Spanish, because it was easier to hear it and repeat it and memorize it than looking at the actual words on the board or trying to squint and try to figure out what they were.
Yeah, my one friend came from the Dominican Republic, and she said how she learned how to speak English because English wasn't her first language, was by watching and listening to a lot of television and having like English subtitles at the bottom. So again, it's like hearing it and then repeating it and then reading it. It kind of just gets in your head and you kind of learn it that way.
But it was funny though, because in choir we were learning as Chelsea's, and I remember I got a lot of trouble with my teacher because I was pronouncing some of the words wrong, and I only learned because one of our singers took me aside, and she figured out the reason I was saying it wrong is because how I heard it wasn't the correct way you're supposed to sing it. And since I didn't have any other way to know the difference, I never caught on I was doing it wrong until someone took me aside and walked me through it. Yeah.
Well, they say that up until the age of 12, so it's something around that. You can absorb languages.
Yeah, it's usually like 4 or 5.
The window is between 2 and 12.
Yeah, you can, and then the brain starts calcifying and changing. Then you become a teenager and you can't learn anything for 5 years, 8 years. You're just a nightmare, and you should, male or female, you should just be locked away and fed to. No, you become a teenager, and the teenage brain is different because it's physically structurally different. The brain changes until once you become an adult. I think it's in the early 20s. It finally takes its actual final complete and utter form, so that
I feel like I have a lot of trouble speaking the language, but I can hear it or I can read it. I can break it down and simplify it to what it is in English, but do not ask me to say it.
Well, the interesting thing also is that these days, when we talk about learning a language, we actually learn to do 4 things. We learn to hear and speak it, which are effectively the same thing. We learn to read it. We learn to write it. And as far as we're concerned in modern day, certainly in the Western side, that's it. When you learn a language, you learn to read it, you learn to write it, you learn to speak it. That wasn't always the way. Everybody learned to speak, unless obviously you had hearing difficulties. Everybody learned to speak. There's a reason it's called your mother tongue, because you learn it from your mother and father.
Right, it's passed down from the family.
Yeah, exactly. Learn it, you pick it up. You learn it up by someone leaning over the crowd again, oogie, googie, 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 goo. And I wonder how we ever learned to do anything. And I'm so glad most babies are not going to remember what you said to them when they were babies, because it would be so.
I think that's why. I think that's why I enjoy when you study abroad or you go to different places, different countries, because you hear the language, and by the end of the week, you have at least a sense of the basic or root words.
Yeah, well, I mean, I remember I was in the Territorial Army in my teens. That's our equivalent of your National Guard. Not the same,
Wow.
but I was at one point I had a lesson in Russian, and the officer that gave the lesson did not speak word one of English throughout the entire lesson.
Damn.
He just spoke in Russian. But because he was speaking, it was obvious what he was saying. You could pick it up. I couldn't remember any of it now. I mean, this was a long time ago. The only Russian I can still remember is not repeatable in front of polite company, because I learned it from Sven Hassel's novels about the Eastern Front, and just about every single word, apart from possibly "comrade," was the sort of language you'd expect soldiers to use to the enemy in war. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I think for French, the one I know is Frères Laughter, and you were on primary school to sing it. That's pretty much it.
No, now I'm gonna start saying it. Dang it.
Oddly enough, come to think, I think I know the same phrase I know a couple of phrases in Irish Gaelic, which I definitely wouldn't want to repeat in polite company. And that's about all the Irish Gaelic I know. Is rather rude. But it's because, but the other thing is, even throughout history, if you go back to the medieval period, and I don't know so much before that, but so you could learn to write without being able to learn to read.
Well, back then, a lot of them didn't know how to read unless they were the royals or rich.
Yeah, but
Right.
I mean, a lot of people. This is one of the things we literacy meant a slightly different thing. Literacy, you could speak a language, you could perhaps read it. You would probably be able to perhaps write your name. The local cleric. One
The way that
definition.
people would go to the church and pay them to write the letters or write a book, and for them not to.
Oh, really?
Clerics were literate. Every single cleric could read and write, probably in their own language and in Latin. In fact, there was a thing called benefit of the clergy, and this all ties in, and I've got to be very careful I don't end up talking for 25 minutes. But basically, if you could claim to be clergy, you could be tried for any crime up to and including murder by a church court, not by a civil court.
What does that mean?
It means that rather than being charged in a court, in the King's Court or a court of law, you were tried in a clerical court by the church, and you were probably going to get off a lot lighter. This, in fact, is one of the major things that Henry II tried to put down, tried to do away with, and she tried to bring everybody under the law of the land. And this is why he got into trouble with a certain friend of his called Thomas, who became Archbishop of Canterbury.
So, to simplify it, modern day celebrity court is what that was back then for clerical court.
No, modern day, everybody in theory is subject to the same law.
That makes sense.
Yep, right, privilege for a lesser sentence.
Yeah. You may go to a different level of court. I mean, in this country, it's magistrates' court or civil court for things that aren't necessarily legal, but are sort of more functional. But magistrates' court or crown court. Back in the day, if you could claim benefit of clergy, which effectively meant that you could read and write, you could claim benefit of clergy, which meant you were not subject to the laws of the land, you were subject to the laws of the church. And that meant you could kill someone, and
Jeez.
you could then
Didn't get
claim
away with
benefit
it.
of clergy and not necessarily get away with it, but I mean, even until recently, there have been scandals within. I mean, bearing in mind, as I said earlier, this is what we now call a Catholic Church. There were no other churches at the time, where the church has moved people around because they don't want to be in the church in the disrepute. But the whole thing of this was that benefit of clergy were taught to read and write, and there used to be a thing called the hanging phrase, and supposedly, if you could read this, you had this thing. You said, "I want to claim benefit of clergy. I'm a clergy. I'm a member of the clergy." Didn't mean you were a vicar or a churchman. It was much wider than that. And basically, they plonked this bit of paper in front of you, and you had to read it. And I believe it was. I can't remember what it was. My brain.
It would prove like you were a member of the church.
Yeah, but it was always the same one, and it was from one of the Proverbs or I can't remember what it was now. I didn't know, but apparently it's always supposed to be something, and they reckon that you could actually learn it and pretend to read it because it was quite well known. But the thing was that yes, the clergy could read and write. So yes, the clergy may well teach you to your local priest may well teach you to write your name so that you personally
sorry, my PT fell asleep.
so that you personally could sign a document, because it was still legal. You still had legal documents, and you personally could sign a document with your name, and you would know that was your name. As you say, the priest may well have to read the document to you, but even royalty.
Yeah, I mean, it was off the price.
Yeah, but I mean, there was. I mean, Alfred the Great spoke something like 5 languages, but he couldn't write them.
Was there any way to prove, like, how you're saying, like, if it was well known and people could learn it and pretend like they could read and write, there wasn't a way to prove otherwise?
Yeah, stick something else in front of them. You stick something else in front of them and they can't read it. You know they've learned the phrase. That's what was called the hanging phrase, because it was apparently always the same phrase. It was
Hey, don't feel bad. I read about it. I just don't remember either.
It was.
No, he's gonna remember it later, like after the stream, and then kick himself, like, "Dang it!"
Yeah, but this was the thing, and this is why it was such a big thing that Henry II wanted to rein the clergy in. He appointed his best mate, Thomas, to be Archbishop of Canterbury, because he thought that Thomas agreed with him, and Thomas was going to help rein the clergy in and make them subject to the laws of the land.
Right,
Thomas became Archbishop of Canterbury, and all of a sudden he got religion. Henry got a bit this went on for many years. Henry famously got rather annoyed at this. Supposedly said something in desperation, and 4 of his knights hightailed it back over from France, which was part of the British, the Angevin Empire at the time, part of Henry's realm, over to England. 4 of these knights go to Westminster Abbey and stab Thomas to death. Gets quite well known. Chap's name was Becket, and that's why Thomas Becket was killed. And it actually put the cause of of justice back 200 odd years, they reckon. It's another 200 years before the church was fully pulled into the civil, if you like, into the secular law. Nowadays, everybody in the country is subject to the laws of that land.
Now, see, it's interesting that what I was thinking of is that during the trials and Middle Ages is that they use the same idea, but they use it for the hangman. So they give a phrase, and if they couldn't read it, then they couldn't say, I'm innocent, or I didn't intend to cry, and they'd be hung to death.
Jeez.
And that's where the idea of the hangman Dean came from.
Well, yeah. I don't know. Yeah, I've not heard that one.
Yeah, I did not see the article. That's pretty interesting.
That makes sense. That hangman, yeah. Oh, yeah. I've not thought of that one before, but yeah, that's interesting. That. I thought that one before. I don't notice that connection. See, learn something new every day. Always good to learn something new. I like learning something new.
Yeah, I was writing an article about the children's day where you like how to dust letters and you draw the picture. And I found history about like, oh wow, like every children's day has something to do with something dark.
That's an innocent children's game of like learning like phrases and languages.
Not this origin.
No, apparently.
I find the whole thing fascinating. The way change things stay the same, things change. I mean, you look back at Greek history, Roman history. There's so many things the same. I mean, I'd really love to know exactly what happened at Troy.
Ooh.
For example,
I mean, there's a history that we know, but how do we know if that's authentic?
Especially since a lot of in history, it's the winners that write history, not the truth.
The literate white history, but yes, the winners write the literate white history for the winners, yeah. But I mean, you go back and you sort of see. I mean, I used to work at my local library, and and at the time I was working, and the film Troy came out. The one with Brad Pitt and
that's a rough film.
But there was also about the same time a mini series called Helen of Troy came out. And I always used to say to people, watch them both. Troy, the big expensive movie.
So long of a movie.
Yeah.
Like what? Like almost 4 hours?
Yep.
We'll tell you the mythology supposedly of the Iliad and the start of the Odyssey. It will tell you the story of Troy from the mythological point of view. Helen of Troy was probably a more historically based one. If I remember right, for example, there was none of this. They didn't go to attack Troy because he kidnapped Helen. The conflict was for power and control of trade because of where Troy was situated.
Right.
Probably much more likely reality. And again, still with the Greeks, it's fascinating to me things like Atlantis and
Lost City.
Yeah, and there's an Atlantis. There's the island of Santorini in the north of the Med.
City of Toronto.
Santorini, it was called Thera in the ancient world. It's believed that, or there was a suggestion that may well have been it exploded in the 13th, 14th century BC.
Like, I am all for somebody trying to tell try to tell a story of Troy in a different way, but then a lot of people argue that the movie with Brad Pitt, Troy, is like the historical tale of what happened to Troy, and it's like if you actually go back and look at history, it's pretty inaccurate.
Right.
Just like
Yeah.
300 is.
Right.
Like a rant.
But remember,
A rant.
they made films for entertainment, not to be accurate.
Hmm.
Why can't it be both?
So no one will watch it.
I would.
Yeah. I mean, it's absolutely historically accurate that Brad Pitt was the Achilles looked like Brad Pitt, and yes. But
See, we're all in agreement. You
the,
shouldn't have made.
the thing that interests me mostly about some of these things is, for example, is that I read somewhere, I can't remember exactly where it was, but that because of the time that Sierra erupted, they think there's suggestions that the eruption of Sierra would, even though it possibly even more so than the Mediterranean, because the Mediterranean is an enclosed sea, the tsunami would have been quite powerful. And a tsunami, when a tsunami comes into land, it pulls water away and then it rushes in. You get plumage.
Right.
You
We'll have nowhere else to go.
Basically, the theory says, okay, you can explain most of the plagues of Egypt in Exodus as a result of a volcanic explosion. So the theory is that the destruction, the event that Plato prompted Plato to create Atlantis, also led to the events that went down in the Bible, at least some of the plagues in Exodus. So it's all connected.
Interesting.
But yeah, I was saying so I had watched the movie 300 before we took before I learned a lot about wait. I'm getting to the best part. You know what the going, so you be quiet. But I didn't really know a lot about Greek history and Greek culture before I watched that movie. But then, a couple months later, we took a Western civilization class in college.
This was amusing.
I was so disappointed because I am thinking that this movie is a historical accurate representation of Greek history.
And you fought me. I told you. You're like, let's watch it with me. I'm like, I don't want to watch it. Like, it's not accurate. Like, yes, it is. Like, okay, you say so.
Because everybody that worked on the film was saying how they did all the research into Greek culture, and everybody else was agreeing with them that it was historically accurate.
But it wasn't.
I mean, the skeleton of the movie is.
It was very accurate to the comic graphic novel it was based on.
Exactly.
And again, I'll go back a bit further. I remember there was a TV series in the 60s, 70s called The Time Tunnel, and they went back to try one of those. Sorry, they went back to Thermopylae, but they went back to Troy and Thermopylae in those. Yeah, I mean,
No, you're dating yourself again. It's fine.
Thermopylae is always. I mean,
back in my day, TV was all black and white.
Yes, I remember when we had I remember when we got our first colour TV. There'd been a series of science fiction films on, and the week we got our first colour TV, they stopped showing colour films and started showing all the black and white ones.
Right. Well, I guess the way it's like now we have color TV. This is what you could have had with but without the advancement of technology.
Yeah.
I don't know. I've seen all old films. I think black and white color is better than sound films.
Ooh. But then you can make up your own story.
That's true.
I mean, I don't know if you want me to make up the story to go along with a silent film, but
no, you'd probably a little bit perverted.
No.
what is. I mean, the thing is that there's two or three really quite interesting channels that I watch where they talk about movie adaptations or TVs, and one or two of them is particularly historical accuracy. Well, the thing is, I mean, I think most people don't quite understand that you've got to, if you're telling a story, if you're making a film and it's a drama, not a documentary, it's not going to be
Entertaining.
wholly accurate. I mean, the most obvious thing that nobody actually really thinks about, but historical inaccuracies, is if they were completely accurate, we wouldn't understand a word that was being said.
Exactly.
How many of us would understand 300?
I mean, unless you're a history
They
nerd.
spoke in ancient Greek and ancient Persian.
Exactly. It
Plus,
was accurate being the language too.
Oh
I mean,
yeah, that's true.
some of the inaccuracies you have to have, otherwise it's completely pointless. There weren't that many people that could actually watch a medieval series and actually understand how many of us could actually watch Vikings if and actually understand the Norse and Anglo-Saxon they were speaking? Not many of us.
Very true.
Yeah. But
I mean, or would they just not care to know? Like,
Right.
this isn't about me or my culture, so why am I watching it?
Or even better is watch someone mark a Citrus Ruins be like, oh, they're drawing. Yeah, it's that's not gooder. You know?
What?
Like, you know, with ruins, like, I'll be able to see is like someone drawing, so they don't want to try to like decipher or understand it.
I even like understand the magic behind what it means.
Right. Or translations for it.
Like a ruin for death. Like, oh, it looks pretty. You don't know what it means. Your soul is not mine.
we can understand. Obviously, there have to be some things they have to do because it's a film, but it's when they take these things they just can't be bothered. It could so easily get right that it gets annoying. You know, when you get, I mean, one of my pet peeves is fire arrows.
But they're so pretty.
They're not accurate.
Because you really can't light an arrow on fire. I mean, like you dip it in oil, right? And then light it.
You can't. Yes, you can't. There are some excellent reasons why you can't. Actually, I've got an arrowhead that is a fire arrow. But what it is, it's a little cage, and you put a coal or an ember in it, a hot ember in it, and you fire it into thatch.
Don't tell Laura not.
Possibly wood, and hopefully thatch catches light. It's not something you shoot at people because although it looks good on film, why would you want? No, you want to pierce their arm and kill them. You don't want to go ping and set a fire. So you just pull it out. You use it it's a siege weapon. You use it to burn.
Right, to build down the places they're keeping their food and
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Or
and
food,
supplies.
horses. Yeah, food.
Metal areas.
I'm just picturing like a giant blaze of fire.
You at the risk of being really nasty, you do not want a war horse going mad.
You lost me now.
I know. It happens every time it's on fire.
But you can't like take like a wooden arrow and light it on fire?
No.
No, because look, what happens when you blow on a candle if it's not a magic candle?
It goes out.
Correct. Turn that around. The fire going through the air is exactly the same effect.
That's why
it'll go out. It'll burn. It'll go out. It'll burn through the arrow. If you make an arrow big enough and thick enough, and what you could. I mean, a war bow is 170-pound pull. So every time you're pulling back on that bow, you're putting a 170 pounds weight on. You're effectively lifting 170 pounds.
Yeah, so if you were at a fire, you'd have to have an object on it to have a fire, like coal or charred different an oil or something like that. It can't just be an actual arrow on fire.
Yeah, it's basically it's physically impractical to do. They do it with special effects. We do it, but you can do it, and they're not. It's just not practical to do the way it's done in movies. It's a siege weapon. So you shoot it into a castle, you shoot it, or possibly ships. You may, if you're lucky, catch sails on fire or something. But as you say, it looks pretty. It looks really good, and it does. It looks really good. It looks really impressive, and that's why they do it.
No, I'm just gonna look away.
That's okay, little pie.
I'm embarrassed because I know why you're laughing at me. It's pretty to watch things as they burn.
Oh.
Yeah, I mean the fire. Yeah,
you agree with me.
Well, it's like, I mean, even with the proverbial ones, with the old the Viking ones, they didn't set the boat out and then fire arrows at it.
Right.
They set the boat on fire before they pushed it out.
Right. But yeah, the misconception is that people set it with fire arrows, and it's like, no, it doesn't work that way.
No.
I've learned a lot during the stream.
Well, I mean, I say these things, but again, excuse me, you do this, and it's all those sorts of, as I was saying earlier on, you know.
Yeah, when we were watching, the second one for How to Train Your Dragon, you do it to the father. Lauren's like, "Why are you mad?" And like, it's not accurate. That's why I'm mad.
Well, even to things like it would actually make it. It would actually make a historical film, I think, more interesting if they actually had the right colours. If you're in a castle, for example, and they've actually got tapestries on the wall, they've actually got bright colours, they've actually got paintings and this sort of thing, rather than just dull stone walls. At the very least, they'd have been whitewashed or something, or lined or something. At the very least, and that would probably look more interesting, I think, than just the plain stone walls you get.
Yeah. Being colorblind, sometimes it's hard to tell if, like, in movies, if, like, it's supposed to have a picture or it's just the lighting you use and there's nothing there.
Sorry, say again?
I thought the downside for me is that when you, like, watch the movies that are, like, set during the Middle Ages or, like, television shows.
Or in a castle.
Yeah. Because I'm colorblind, sometimes it's hard to tell if it's, like, what color the wall's supposed to be, or it's just a lighting that's supposed to change color.
Yeah, this is doing that. I suppose that's a fair enough comment. Of course,
you have to remember a lot of times too, like castles are traditionally seen as being like dark and not filled with like tapestries and paintings. So you think just bland.
I'm agree with that. I'm saying that I know a lot of times they'll use lighting to make that illusion, like a cheap way to place it.
The other thing that I detest is when they say fire. No. No. The thing is, again, it's modern day perceptions. We all know. Really, aim fire. You say that to someone in any era pre the gunpowder age, and they're going to go, "What? What's on fire? Put a fire out. Where? Fire? Where?" It doesn't mean anything. It means fire. You know, something's on fire. You don't.
Fire.
Yeah, you don't say fire to archers from any period.
I know.
Because it's meaningless to them. It's shoot or loose, and you know, again, it's a little things like that.
I didn't know that. I just knew that fire was wrong term to him. Like, that seems too
Like you had like before,
historical of what the nuclear was.
Like you had before
like,
gunpowder.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, but you know what fire was? I mean, up until gunpowder and you get firearms, i.e. guns.
I mean, the term wasn't created until gunpowder.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, until you get firearms as weapons, fire means all this burny stuff that is good for cooking your food, but you don't want to get out of control. So it's literally meaningless. It's like saying, it's like saying pottery. What? What do you mean pottery? What's pottery got to do with anything? When you mean shooting fire? It's literally a meaningless phrase until it means something. And for most of history, it didn't mean anything about
Right.
weapons.
So let me ask you both this. So if you're reading a book that's set in ancient times and they're trying to modernize it to make it easier for the reader, do you just like give the author a free pass, or do you get upset by it? Go ahead, Nick.
That depends. If there's like one or two words, I can let it slide, and like in my head, I'll just place it. But if it's a good chunk of the book, I will not finish reading. I'll just put this aside and be like, all right, here's all the things you should have done instead.
I think again, I agree. It depends. I'm getting a bit more leeway than I used to. But yeah, I mean, if you start trying to put in modern sensibilities, modern ideas into historical novels, no.
Right.
If you're putting it depends what you're doing. I mean, I've no doubt that humans throughout history, whatever language they've spoken, have had their equivalent of bloody hell, sipping it, get out, all the little phrases that we use. We may not necessarily know what they were. So if you're using language and you sort of start putting in modern terms in, it can stick out, but
I mean, some people just don't want to do the research, so they just make things up, and then
right.
it's your history and be like, this is wrong.
I mean, you saw when we were writing Hunted, I was writing for Donovan. I'd have to like write down a phrase and write and like, okay, I have to remember he's from this time period. These words wouldn't be in his repertoire.
What a big word. Don't hurt me.
But I did pass for writers that will take a character that's from ancient times and like introduce it to modern, and then like they'll show like what words don't work or which ones they don't know about. But I can't forget when they're trying to make the whole thing in the past and it's all modern terminology.
Yeah, like having been history buff one, I could actually still stand to watch Hercules' Legendary Journeys and Xena.
Oh.
And I could watch them and enjoy them, despite the fact that in one, okay, so I think they're in suspended animation for 50 years, but basically in one long lifetime, Xena and Gabrielle visited ancient Troy and met King Arthur.
Sure.
Yeah, right. But I could take that because okay, yeah, it's myth, it's legend. Yeah, But the one thing that stood out to me was when Hercules turned around to Aeolus and told him not to mess with the space-time continuum. And he used that phrase, almost word for word.
That's not there.
They had a time jump one, and he said, right, but make sure you don't do anything to damage the space-time continuum. And I thought, no, that kind of stands out like a very, very sore thumb.
Right.
That sort of thing really stands out as really anachronistic.
And like what Nicole was saying, that's not even like the terminology that you would know.
Right. So instead of saying don't mess with the space time continuum, I'd be like, don't mess with the Weaver of the Fates. And that would be more realistic.
That'd be a good way of putting it.
Yeah, if the concept had even occurred to them. And they'd known they'd gone back in time, but would the concept have even occurred to them? I don't know.
You have the mic, right?
Yeah.
You're good. Keep talking. I just gotta get the laptop cord.
I'll just tell him.
Didn't want the laptop to die. The thing plugged me in. But I was curious because I know that's the debate within the writing community of like when things. How many times can the author mess up with like history and historical culture before you are like, yeah, I'm not reading this.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, fortunately, some of my favourite novels. One of the things that I really used to enjoy was historical murder mysteries. I still do enjoy them, but some of the really best authors of those were historians. So they knew the area. Great things. Well, some of them you do them, and I used to have list of where you'd actually have terms, a glossary, if you like, of what some of those terms meant.
Oh, wow.
Cool. That's neat.
So yeah, I mean, so there's one of the series I used to love was medieval rather than ancient, was Crown of John mysteries, and the author that wrote them was a Home Office pathologist. He was a medical examiner in your terms, I think.
Wow.
And he knew, but he was also interested in history. So, for example, the very term coroner comes from the word crowner, which was a role introduced by Richard the Lionheart, and it was largely to do with things like taxation, fish. It had a lot more to do with government than investigation, if you like. But he did investigate. He was responsible for investigating murders. So again, you get lists of looks up what crowner means, what this means, what that word means, and explains them. And I think when they're doing that one, that's so much better when they've actually done the research, because you know the research is there. Lindsay Davis, I love. Lindsay Davis does two sets. She's got her current series. She's got two sets of series, murder mysteries set in ancient Rome. The first lot is about Marcus Falco, and the second lot is about his adopted daughter.
That's a new one for me.
10 years down the line. It's really because the first one is set under, let me see, Trajan, and then
I might be more of reality. You might not figure it out right away. Maybe I could be wrong. You could figure it out in like the first chapter.
But I mean, it is there are some. I mean, the thing is, there's some going back. I know of a series. There's a couple of series set in Greece. I mean, some of them, for example, have actually got. I think there's a series where Socrates is the main protagonist, and he actually. I don't think I've read any of those, but Socrates solves murders or solves mysteries. So they've gone through the ancient world onwards. Some of the authors specialise in a particular area. Others seem to write over various periods and various series.
Yeah, I like the one novel called Meme Writers. It's set during the Battle of Troy. And at the end of the book, she has pages of all the research she did before she wrote the novel.
It's like a chapter of like citations of like where she did research on like Greece and Amazon and the culture back then. I thought that was impressive.
Oh yeah, indeed. I mean, it's, as I say, if you're going to, it's a little bit like the debate with history versus fantasy. Most capital F fantasy are basically set in, generally speaking, a medieval world.
Right.
Dungeons and Dragons being the obvious one.
Castle.
Most of it is set because most of it is spin-offs from Tolkien.
Right. Speculation.
Or at least most role-playing type stuff. A lot of fantasy is set off from I say is Tolkien, and Tolkien was a medieval scholar, language scholar, and he was trying to create a mythology, and his mythology, a lot of it comes out of Scandinavian mythology, but he brought a lot of medieval into it. So a lot of fantasy, even Game of Thrones, for example, is largely based on the 100 Years' War. No, not the 100 Years' War. The Wars of the Roses. Between York and Lancaster. That's the large part of George Martin's inspiration. Not entirely.
Yeah. That's what intrigued me to try to read the novels, and I'm intrigued, but it's not worth to read.
Exactly, and that's okay, and that's fine. It's fantasy. We know it's fantasy. As long as the rules fit within that world. And yeah, I mean, if someone's writing a historical fantasy or a what if, then I think I tend to be a lot more lenient, or a lot more understanding of historical inaccuracies than if it's something intended to be historical.
Like when people do the retelling tale, it's like, oh, this is Ron's point of view, or it's about Troy. It's like, but you're trying to kind of history, then you should have your facts right. Otherwise, you can't let it slide.
I mean, the thing with the problem with something like Troy in particular is the only real sources of the Iliad and the start of the Odyssey,
right.
And they are quite clearly and obviously mythology and legend. They are quite clearly legend.
A lot of people think it's actual basic fact, and it's like, no, it's a myth.
Yeah, I mean, there's going back again to King Arthur, which is, because I've been rewatching these series, it's in my mind. But the basis for the King Arthur legend probably goes back to 410, to the 5th century, to about the time when the Romans leave Britain. But everybody about King Arthur thinks knights in shining armour will know that was about 1,000 years later.
Right.
Because a lot of the Arthurian stories are written down or published in the high to late Middle Ages, so the 12th century, 12th century onwards.
There is a teacher I follow called History Explained, and he's been doing King Arthur and the actual legend behind him.
Ooh.
Who was that?
I found it off Loki's channel. His YouTube channel is called History Explained. And every week he'll take part of history and explain it.
I'll have to make a note of that one.
I'm gonna try and find it.
Yeah, as I said, I mean, I'm just writing it down. I mean, I find a lot of that fascinating. That really, I think the only thing I can think of.
History Explained, you said?
I know some doing stuff.
The only thing I can think of in the entire, I can think of possibly two other stories which have had the same impact or as wide known as King Arthur. One of those is Jesus, and I'm not saying I'm not wanting to put down on anybody's religious beliefs purely on the impact of the character. And the other is more like he's probably Robin Hood. Robin Hood. We don't know. Robin Hood is probably the only other character we know so little about. But up to the fact of they're still making Robin Hood, King Arthur films today. I've got a set of comics called Camelot 3000, which tells you everything you need to know. They're set in the 31st century. You know, the history of it spreads and it attracts so much to it.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, there have been a lot of books and film about either like Camelot or King Arthur
or Robin Hood.
Yeah. Well, there was a series back in the 1980s.
I put the link for that YouTube channel in the chat.
Oh, thank you.
And subscribe.
I'm ready to subscribe.
Cheers. Oh,
I'm subscribing to it.
No. It's my laptop. I'm ready to subscribe.
Oh, yeah, totally with you. Wow. Oh. Click on and go back to the chat and click on the link. Okay.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm only in the private. I can't click on it. I have to copy and paste it from the private. That's okay. Yeah, I mean, there was a series in the 1980s called Robin of Sherwood, which was my favourite of the Robin Hood TV series. All the TV series of Robin Hood there have been, and it brought in a lot of mythology, a lot of Celtic mythology to it. A lot of the Anglo-Saxon the Celtic mythology, but also at one point he has a sword which is made by supposedly by the same swordsmith that created Excalibur. So it's tying in tangentially, but it's tying in the Robin Hood story slightly to King Arthur,
right?
Because it's just so. I mean, I honestly don't think there's anything else in the entire history, certainly that I know of Western culture, at the very least, which has had the influence and the widespread attention of the King Arthur myths. The only one, in fact, might possibly be Troy.
Yep.
The story of Troy, but the story of Troy doesn't change. As I say, the only source for Troy really is the Iliad and the Odyssey.
I feel like the other big one is the story between Cleopatra, Julius Caesar, and Mark Antony.
Yeah. I mean, again, there's plenty of well-known, very famous tales, but I still don't think there's anything really that's had because the King Arthur attracts so much to it.
Right.
I mean, what little boy doesn't want to be a knight?
I want to be a knight.
Yeah, I mean, most boys grow up, at least in some point in time, want to be a knight in shining armour, and I suspect most girls grow up wanting to be a princess.
No, I'd rather have a sword.
Yeah,
No, do not give me a bow arrow.
Well, the number of ladies, females, who are actual fighters in all of my reenactment groups have got a number of fighters who are ladies or females. And they are. I'm not a fighter. I'm an archer. I don't fight. I'm not stupid. I can't afford the armor. And I don't want to get hurt. But I mean, knights, fighters, actually, they get into armor and they obviously carefully controlled, trained not to, but they hit each other. No, not very little choreography. It's not stage fighting. It's actually hitting
Like they're
each
actually
other.
going at it.
Yeah, they're actually going at it, but they're going in a controlled way, trained and not wanting to hurt each other, unlike some European martial arts, which seems to be coming out almost as a sport. They go at it, and they do go. Serious injuries can come out of that one. We don't want to hurt anybody. It's show fighting, but yeah, a large number, quite a few of them, are women. They make.
I have a bow and a sword any day.
Yeah,
No, you're not hitting with bow and arrow.
well, not only that, but there is. There are two sorts of.
If I can't have a flamethrower, you can't have a bow and arrow. Okay? Oh, you're gonna change your mind?
Well, how do you make a flame sword?
Well,
It'll melt.
it's not a real thing.
You can make one.
No, but it's not a real thing, is it?
You
I feel like you're teasing me.
only have a flamethrower if you're doing historical enactment, if you're either World War One onwards, or you can prove to me that you've rediscovered the formula for Greek fire, because we still don't know how to make Greek fire.
See? You're teasing me.
Yeah, that's how you would figure it out.
The thing is that there are
I'll
two.
get it. You can thank him.
There are in reenactment probably a lot more so medieval than in ancient reenactment. There were two types of character in reenactment. A lot of people choose a real historical figure and they play that figure. Not necessarily entirely. I mean, a lot of times you'll split over periods and all sorts, but your character will have existed and would have a real identifiable character.
Right.
Or the other sort of character isn't real. Is someone you've made up, but they are fit the period, which is why I say, no offence to my ancient historical reenactor colleagues, but there aren't, as far as I know, there aren't that many historical figures known from those early periods, Greek, Romans, etc. So you can only have so many Crassuses, Antonys, Caesars. But we've got, if you sort of go back to the Anglo-Saxon period and probably Norman period onwards mainly, you've got plenty of historical characters. But a lot of the characters that our ladies play are real historical females, and a lot of them did actually fight. They were able, or at least they got involved. They had to be able to do at least some fighting, possibly, because
Really, they had to have ways to defend themselves.
Right.
Exactly, their husbands were away doing toxic masculinity things like fighting wars. They had to be able to do something. A lot of them probably could do archery, if only in part for hunting. So there are historical stories of. I mean, the most obvious one is Joan of Arc.
Right.
But there are historical figures of other figures who actually fought in, managed their estates, and actually may well have been involved in combat. Not presumably to the extent that reenactors do it. And to be quite honest, Mandalorian armor, which annoys Anita Sarkeesian notwithstanding, you can't very often tell if a figure in large amounts of armor is male or female.
That's very true.
You don't get much beam armor. If I might use the phrase, it tends to be you can quite often, especially if it's I mean, one or two of our ladies have got really long hair, and very few men have really long hair. So if you've got a character who's got a plait down to their waist, chances are it's going to be female. But once they're in army, you can't always tell. There was a few years ago now, a British TV presenter, news presenter, or who had been a news presenter, did a series of 3 or 4 documentaries. He was basically doing documentaries about local customs. I don't want to say folk customs, about like dancing fairs and the sort of that's what I'm. And he did one about reenactment, and he's a bit on camera. He's quite surprised where he actually helps set up someone in armour, and he's quite surprised when it turns out to be a girl, a lady who I actually know.
Right, again, this guy,
he hadn't realised it, but he helps up, and she says thank you, and she says, "Oh, you're a girl," but she what? Well, she is. It actually happens to be someone I used to know because she used to be in one of the groups I'm a member of. But yeah, you don't, I think, see it quite so much in the more further back in history groups that I'm aware of, but I don't know. I could easily be wrong there. And again, I don't know how prevalent it is in the more modern groups. So, for example, you've got I know both sides of the Atlantic have got American Civil War reenactment groups. I know you've got, and your side more so than mine, other one, I believe you have quite a large-ish War of Independence
reenactment,
Revolutionary War reenactments, and the rest of it. Up to that sort of period, and so I don't know how many. If you get a large number of female reenactors playing combat roles there or not, I don't know. And I can only speak from my personal experiences of medieval ones. But
I mean, we have them, but ours is more common with live action role play than reenactments.
Yeah, I mean, I know I've seen. I'd love to go to one of these. If we ever able to move again, I'd actually quite like to go to a Ren fair, one of your Renaissance fairs. Kind of some people said, because I've seen things, but some of the things make the historian in me cringe. Simply because
I mean, some of it they try to make it historically accurate, and others it's like a mockery of it.
Yeah, I mean, some of it's historically accurate, some of it is as you say, LARPing, and that's fine. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that whatsoever. If that's what you want to do, as long as you are aware and if there are members of the public and audience here, they're aware that you're not being as historically accurate, as the historical accuracy is not what you're going for. That's fine. You're there to have fun, and that's it.
Now, the reason last thing is one time I went to Run Fair with our family and our friends, and I ran into one of the actors. And you know, when you're interacting with the crowd, you're supposed to stay in character. Mm-hmm. And I got him off guard because he wasn't expecting me to play and go into that lady of the court tight speech with him.
There's an absolutely fantastic episode of South Park where they go to, it's great. They go to it's their rip off of, it's their Die Hard.
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, but they go to this Wild West or at least Western expansion. I'm not quite sure what the period's called because it's not something I've not familiar with. But they stay in character all the way through, even when the Alan Rickman character's shooting them. But yeah, you get that. You do get that again. You get that's there's a thing called living history and there's living history. There's reenactment and there's battle reenact. Some groups that do battle. And what they'll do is they'll march onto the field. They'll reenact a battle and they'll march off the field, and they'll have no interaction with the public whatsoever.
Right.
That's
their way of reenacting it.
Right.
Yeah, but they'll have people there talking about it. I mean, they'll have people in costume. I mean, the people I'm most familiar with are the Civil Knot, which is one of the English Civil War reenactment groups. But they'll have people, and it's a bit odd because you'll have someone there in full 17th century kit, holding a microphone and describing exactly what's happening, which is a bit can kind of take you out a bit of it. But most of them, they're there for their fun of it. They go on and they don't talk. You get living history, which is people who are in character almost all the time. So whenever the public are there, they're in kit. They're all in kit. Quite often you'll have the tents or whatever open for the public to pop their heads in, and there'll be nothing in there that is out of place for the period they're doing. They'll be cooking food. They'll talk to members of the public. They know the members of the public there. They're not pretending that they're really in the 16th century or whatever. But that's what they all do. And then you get what most of my groups do, which is somewhere in between. We do a bit of that. But we'll do displays. We do fighting displays. We do archery displays. We will talk to members of the public. We're not in character all the time. You're in character if you're doing a fight, if you're doing a display, perhaps. But then you can actually go outside of the arena, and you may actually talk to people.
What?
Saying, are we time?
We have like 10 more minutes.
Okay.
And we started a little late.
Okay, fair enough. I say 3 o'clock in the morning myself.
I know, like I need my stuff, but damn, Colin, you got me beat. Like
yeah,
I know
history nerd.
I know mythology, but you definitely know your history more than I do.
Yes, we're bowing down to you and your knowledge.
Hey, we've all got things. We've all got things we know. We've all got things. I know. I'd love to know more about. I can always learn more about history. I'd love to know more about. I don't even know much about my own national history. I really want to try and learn some more about Scottish, Welsh, and Irish history. I know English history. I know quite a bit of American history because I've taken courses in it out of my interest. But we can always learn new things from other people.
That's true.
Yeah, I would really like to learn more about Irish culture and the history that they have.
Yeah. Oddly enough, a large part of what I know about early medieval Irish culture is actually from playing a werewolf in the White Wolf World of Darkness Werewolf Apocalypse system, because they've got some readers of that. And actually, I know a bit about Native American history from exactly the same system, because they've done the research and a lot of it is based on that mythology.
Yeah, I mean, I know a little bit about Irish from writing articles about the witch hunts or about their deities, which is why I know that if you're a doter, you would never celebrate St. Patrick's Day because he's not celebrated. Instead, it's more of like historical family day.
I must admit, I mean, I can never, I can be honest, I can never remember when St. George's Day is, and St. George's Day is the patron saint of England. I'm really not good on those at all. But I know it seems to be celebrated and more in America than it is I think it's more celebrated these days, but probably more celebrated in someplace in America than it is perhaps in many places in the UK, and perhaps even Ireland. I don't know about Ireland itself. But then St. Patrick was English, so it was, if I remember right, St. Patrick himself converted. I've got to get it right. I think St. Columba was an Irishman who converted or reconverted the English, and St. Patrick was an English.
Was Irish that converted English, and then and caused a lot of death for those who practice magic in Ireland.
I think because it's weird because at the time Rome falls in the 5th century, the Roman Empire's Christian, and it's been Christian for 100 years. So most of Britain is Christian, and then then it seems to recede and go back to being pagan, and then I think it's if I can remember it right, it's Columba, I think, comes over because Ireland's Christian and been Christian for quite a while. And he comes over, and I think I'm getting it the right way around. Columba reconverts England to Christianity, to Celtic Christianity rather than Roman Christianity, because they're different. And then St. Patrick, if I remember right, is actually an Englishman who's taken as a child as a slave to Ireland and grows up and does his thing in Ireland. I think I'm getting out the right way around.
That's the only bad thing about history. Like, if you remember it wrong, like, you doubt yourself. Like, was this question?
The odd thing is, you talk about the Scots and the Irish. The Scottii, where Scotland gets its name from, were an Irish tribe.
Right.
And they moved to Scotland, and the Scots, I think I'm right in saying that most of the Protestants in Ireland, so that all but one, I think originally came from Scotland. I think that you have a swap there, not at the same time, but the Scots, they're not Scots. Scotland was named for the Scottish, who were an Irish tribe, and then you get a lot of Scots who don't move into Ireland. It's weird. It's a weird history.
That's the one thing about history is that you gotta see what you're reading. Because a lot of times you'll be like, "Wait, I thought this was this religion." It's like, nope, it really is Stalin, or you made Stalin. It's no, it's made America. It's which one is it?
Yeah,
I think that's why I prefer mythology more than history to keep track of it.
No, it's. I mean, even to the point of when I was at school, the certain Iceni queen, who is very famous in this, who's that famous in this country, she's got a statue outside Parliament, was called Boadicea. Now, current belief is that her name was probably more like Boudica. So in my life, in my lifetime, our understanding has changed of the language and the history has changed that much to convert the name of a very famous person who's been famous hundreds, thousands, probably 1,000 or more years. Typically of the English, she's famous and she lost. A lot of our historical figures and mythological figures actually lost in the end.
Right.
We're a bit weird like that in English. I mean, even King Arthur wasn't actually English. He actually fought against the English, the Angles and Saxons. He fought for the Celts,
right?
The Britons.
But a lot of people remember that.
Yeah, we're really, really weird people.
No.
God knows how we managed to rule a quarter of the world.
Well, actually, that's fine. I want to thank you, Colin, for coming
Yeah,
on.
thanks,
Oh my
Colin.
god, I
You're
learned
welcome.
so much. My
Okay,
brain is like,
I'll give you one more. Do you know why the sun never set on the British Empire? Because
why?
not even God would trust an Englishman in the dark.
Wow. I gotta applaud you on that. That was good.
See, we can be that self-deprecating as well.
Well, thank you for joining us. This was
Yeah.
fun.
That's okay. I had so much enjoyed our talk about Greek mythology. I know I did. I hope it was great to talk to you ladies. It was really real fun. It was good fun.
Do you have anything else to add?
No, I was just like you. It's like weird idea about they went to history and like, oh.
Like, I'm just gonna. Where's the pot? Ooh, sorry. Ow! I just hit my arm against the microphone.
Oh,
But,
what on the
yeah,
elbow?
I should have had like a bowl of popcorn and just sit here and just listen to Colin give a lecture on history. Fascinating.
I hope it didn't go on too much because I know
No.
I have got them, and I joke with my family that I've definitely got I have to be careful not to push my lecture switch.
Well, I think it helps that you and me were like kind of going back and forth. Lauren's like, I'm just gonna sit here.
Yeah.
That's what I said. Like, I needed popcorn. You're not even listening.
That's what I love about doing reenactment shows more than anything else. When I actually get to talk to people and explain things and discuss things and tell them things that fascinate me.
Right. Next week on Lecture in History.
I'm so hoping Loki goes back to do his history on a Thursday night, actually. But much as I love the days. So I think if I ever actually manage to work out the time to and get effort to actually do anything on my channel, it would be largely history. But
You should. You clearly know your stuff.
Yes.
Well, I've thought about it a couple of times. I don't know how I go about it.
I mean, you can kind of just do like a setup like this, just like do an hour or two, you know, even just like once a week of just like you going over periods of history or like figures in history
or facts not well known.
Well, the thing is that there are so many really good channels, history channels. Mind you, I mean, I'm happy that because the fact there's that many history channels means people are still interested in it, which is good.
I know, but you explain it in such a simplistic way. Like I was able to follow along.
Oh, thank you.
I wasn't bored.
Oh.
You know, sometimes you listen to history and you can like talk like an hour about like one fact. And it's like, okay, yes.
And they have the Bill Nye voice.
You have wow. You have said like 100 different ways of explaining like the culture. Thank you. Can we move on? This is the food day and the wine they drink.
That's just me when I get the mode switched to art to medieval history and archery, and that's it. The switch just gets pressed and go on and on.
No, Nick, you're not changing my mind. You can't have a bow and arrow.
Crap.
Sorry.
That's okay. I just pretend like my LARP have one.
So the really the funny thing about that is I find I have to be, if I'm talking to people from your side of the pond, I have to bear in mind, without meaning to be rude at all, that you guys have got a lot less history than we have.
We do.
Yeah. And that was kind of like the joke I was making. That you're fine.
I mean, it's what again. If going back to this series of lectures, there's one of the first things the professor saying, because it's an American company. Most, I presume, of the lectures are made mainly for an American audience, although they're available across the world. She makes a point at one point that one of the first points she makes is that if you think about it, that Britain, Roman Britain, the Goths sacked Rome, the legions are pulled back. So effectively, all the law enforcement, because there were no police forces or anything, and all the military just disappear overnight. Britain has been a Roman colony, so Britain has been Roman Britain for longer than the United States has been a nation.
I mean, that's a fact. That's not. You mean real? It's actual fact.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean at that time for nearly 400 years, when the Romans left, 350 years, Britain had been Roman, and they saw themselves as Roman citizens. So I have, because little things like, if I'm talking to the British, just something about archery, for example, I'll say, if your local church is 600 or so years old, which a lot of churches in this country are,
right,
you may find that there's stone walls with lots and lots of scratches on them. And what that is where the archers doing their practice at the butts before or after mass, as they had to, have sharpened their arrows.
Right.
And if your town or your village has got an area called the butts, probably that's where the archery practice happened. But of course,
to find a church that's like that and go.
Yeah, but of course, so that's obviously if I'm speaking to, that means nothing to you good folks, because of course, by the time you became a nation, we weren't using bows. The only people using bows and arrows were the Native Americans. We were using firearms.
Right.
So the whole thing doesn't mean anything. The whole thing is, there isn't anything that you can connect with for that. Whereas I can't connect with, I can't connect historically with your march, with your westward expansions, with the Indian Wars, like you know, with all the conflict that the American people, or the American settlers had with the natives. That doesn't mean anything to me. I can't connect with that because that's from my experience.
You know what this made me think of? When we were at Tower of London, when we were with the guards.
Yeah. But like, oh, Americans that want to learn more about, British history, let's unload on them. It's like,
well, it's funny because how it really occurred was that they thought we were out to no good. Because we were in the Tower of the World, I think the term for it.
Yep.
Where they have the crowns and jewelry for the king and queens. And me and Laura are both visiting parents, so we were a little too close to display cases for their comfort.
Like I'm on top of the rope where it's like, you can't pass this rope.
And when we turned around and they called out to us, they saw our canes and they're like, oh, well, okay. It's like, you probably can't see it. So instead of being mad, we got a private tour with all the guards and we got to learn like all the histories and all their stories.
Wow.
So we weren't being like snobbish, like, we don't want to hear about your history, it's boring. We were like, yes, tell us more.
There's you can almost certainly get it. I don't know if it's on any of the anything like BrickBox, but certainly if you look on certain sites, there's a series called Inside the Tower of London, and it's exactly that. It's a documentary it's been going on for several years now, and it's literally about life inside the Tower of London. And there's the beefeaters, the yeoman warders, there's the other members of staff, because the yeoman warders they all live there.
Right.
They live in the tower. When you guys all go home, they've still got this, and they eventually go back, and they've got flats in the walls of the tower and in various places in the tower.
Yeah, it's interesting when you go back there now, they don't actually want like tourists to go in there, even though we did by accident.
Yeah, I mean, there's some areas because it is still a working. I'm not obviously there, but he's still there are still people. I said that the yeoman warders all live there. Several other
Yeah, we
members
went
of
to a lot of areas we weren't supposed to.
We're flying. We don't know where we're going. Okay.
It's that's the name. It's called Inside the Tower of London. I think it's called. It's fascinating because they do. I mean, they talk to the. You see them practicing and and how they actually learn the spiel and all the history that I have to learn.
I'm writing it down so I can look it up.
I personally find it quite fascinating. And of course, they're all senior non-commissioned officers and only non-commissioned officers, not officers, senior non-commissioned officers of the British Armed Forces. So they've all got 20 years plus military service as well. So they know their stuff.
Okay, I'm gonna know, but I can help you look it up.
Okay.
I mean, I know I would be interested. I know you want to watch it. No. When we went to the White Tower, you're like, I'm not leaving.
Yeah. Well, you think it's actually that. I mean, what's fascinating about that is when you hear about people being kept in the tower, they weren't all prisoners. They weren't all. It was a working palace.
People wanted to be there.
Yes, there were prisoners, and obviously people were executed. There were, but it was also a royal palace. It's Her Majesty's Royal Palace, and it was a palace.
That makes sense. I mean, that's where you keep the royal jewels and stuff. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, one of the things they used, I believe it's no longer on display, and I personally think I can understand why, but I think there used to be a chair on display there, a wooden chair, one of these wooden frame chair with ones with not with a solid black, but with bars down the back, cricket something, and two of them were broken, and that was on display. They were broken because they'd been broken by the bullets of a German spy executed in the Tower of London in World War II.
Wow.
In World War II.
No, yeah, I don't think we saw that.
No. I mean, we went in 2013 and it wasn't there. It was just like...
I mean, I don't know where it was. But I mean, I think it may also possibly because they told us sort of the poor the chap that was executed there. Fascinating story, World War II history. The British.
I don't want the hills. Or somewhere we don't get to in time.
That's true. A big area of land. And there's a lot of towers. Like, we only went in 2.
3.
There are 13 when you did your article?
Yes, there's 13 towers total, plus the 2 hills.
Wow.
You need like a whole day to explore it.
Yeah. You do from some of these places you do.
And shoot, that's how I felt about the museum one too. It's like one day it's like, oh, we went out for a tour of the museum.
Well, I mean, I've done quite a few of several of the reenactment shows I do, but I'm not the last year, obviously. We do at castles, and most of them, unfortunately, are actually ruins.
That's very neat.
Yeah.
A little jealous.
But unfortunately, it means living under canvas. I don't particularly like camping. I'll do it for the shows, but yeah, we tend to do it.
Like me, it's like I'm not a fan of camping, but I'll suffer through it. I get to like have fun working. Or at least it's an option for you.
Yeah. Yeah, you did these things, weren't you? But it's I mean, some of the thing is, you can look for history anywhere.
That's true.
Excuse me. We will trace history back, and I still like to get back into learn more about your history, American history, South American. I was talking to.
I know, but that seems like British history is much more fascinating.
Or Irish.
Yeah.
I mean, and there's even Canadian history. I mean, there's several Canadian. I think most of them are actually guys rather than girls. On the channels I subscribe to. That so. Um, One or two bits and pieces. I know one or two bits, but most of what I know of the Canadian history is little bits and pieces I know, and I know it from the British side, from the English. From the English, I've heard of it because it's big in the English history. I don't know much about Canadian history itself. I'd have to know more about that. I'm kind of hoping that History of an R&R do some more of their, North or South American history. Mind you, I do like it when they do English history.
Are we trying to settle?
Yeah.
he pulled us back to him with history.
And probably our longest podcast.
Oh, yep.
So I've just clocked again what the time is my time.
Together. And I'm just like sitting here like pretending I have popcorn.
Oh.
I probably really should go because it's 3:30 in the morning, and I probably should go and try and get to bed.
Oh my god!
Oh yeah, that's right.
It's that big of a time difference.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Omar said earlier for now it was 1 a.m. for him.
He like me, you just stay up and not sleep ever. That's fine. Sleep overrated. Just inhale the caffeine and you're fine.
You would say that.
I had like 2 cups of coffee today.
Ew.
2 though.
Ew. Give me tea any day.
Oh,
Crush.
don't.
You should go to bed.
See, I'm too much of a gentleman to want to abandon you ladies
Aww.
or some such like that.
Well, it was very nice of you to come on here.
Yeah, thanks again, Colin.
Happy.
I was very excited that you wanted to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one thing I can do is talk.
But did you decide what we were going to talk about next week?
Not yet. I mean, do you want to pitch a topic? Seems like I'm always the one pitching it. I mean, we can do another one from Flossie, so I'll just learn more into history.
Mythology Part 2.
Yeah, we can do that.
And like how it's represented it in like pop culture.
Yeah, sounds good.
My area expertise.
We're like, yes, I didn't know he'd be included.
Yes. Wait, what? I was included. I contributed in this conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah. No. Me. You're gonna be so many. You're gonna make fun of me for it later.
Oh yeah.
Why?
It's fun. So we'll see everyone next Friday at 8, hopefully. p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Until then, bye guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Have a good evening.